If you have ever felt stuck, frozen, or frustrated by the fact that you want to make a change, but you can't seem to start, you can't get over that metaphorical hump, so to speak, then this video is for you. I'm going to explain why that's happening, and most importantly, I'm going to explain how you can break through it. My name is Adam Roa. I am an artist, a poet, a transformational coach. I lead group programs, including Wizard School, which is a program in which I break down the energetic principles of transformation, reality, relationships, business. And this concept of activation energy is one of the most critical and most important things that I ever talk about, and I want to share it with you today. So let's start with the perspective of physics, right? In physics, Newton's first law states that an object at rest stays at rest unless it is acted upon by an external force. And an object in motion will stay in motion unless it's acted on by an external force. So what does that mean? Essentially, that the energy required to get something to move must be greater than the energy required to keep it in place. And the energy required to stop something in motion must be greater than the energy that's keeping it in motion, right? Makes sense? So that's the first concept that's really important to understand as we get into the energetics. And the second concept is something called activation energy. And I'm using that term, which is from chemistry, which is the spark basically that causes transformation. It is the amount of energy that is necessary to create a chemical reaction, which we'll get into, right? And human beings are actually the same. We are built to expand. We are built to grow. This is the natural state of a human being. But if you don't hit that activation threshold, if you don't hit that amount of energy needed to either stop something or get something in motion, then you stay stuck. You never actually make the decision, not because you're lazy necessarily, but because the energy required is greater than what you currently have. And so let's explain a bit of the nature of human beings, because I see human consciousness as constantly expanding. You are expanding in each and every moment, no matter what you do, just based on the fact that you are having experiences. Every experience is new data points. And all of that new data is helping you see new patterns, and those new patterns are an expansion of your consciousness. Now, if your natural state is one of expanding consciousness, then that means your consciousness is in motion. It is in expansion, which means that there is a force required to slow that down. There is a force that needs to be greater than the force of expansion in order to stop the expansion. Now, from my perspective, there is no force that can stop the expansion. Again, consciousness is expanding constantly. That's what this is a giant simulation by which you are here to experience life. And every single one of us is having different experiences through our own unique lenses, which means collectively, the consciousness continues to expand. Even a moment of fear where we feel contracted is a unique experience because it's happening through us, and that unique experience is a form of expansion. However, you can greatly slow down the speed of that expansion. You can dramatically slow that process down by putting a force that resists that expansion, and that force is fear. That force is limiting beliefs. That force is trauma and wounding and insecurity. That force acts against the speed of expansion and slows it, and it opposes that natural proclivity towards expansion. And so at the greatest level, if your fear is massively impacting you, if you are so afraid of putting yourself out there, if you are so afraid, let's use dating as an example, if you are so afraid of rejection that you're not willing to put yourself out there, then in that expansion process, you will not ask people out on dates. You will not go on dates. You will not get on dating apps. You will not take the action to expand in the ways that you want if your intention is to get into a relationship. That fear is so great that it will slow the speed of your evolution significantly. And we are on this roller coaster of life. We are moving through life in such a profound and powerful way that we can either resist every single step, we can resist every turn and every loop, or we can surrender into it. We can put our hands up and say, I'm going to enjoy this ride. And when we surrender into it, we are now in the flow of our natural expression, the natural expansion that you are here as a conscious being to have, right? And so the question now is, how do you break free when you are finding yourself stuck? Because that feeling of being stuck, I think, is one we can all relate to. I know that in so many times in my life, I have felt as if I'm not progressing, I'm not expanding, I'm not moving in the direction that I want to move. So how do you break free? You need that activation energy. You need that point by which you will cross the threshold and a chemical reaction will happen, and there will be a catalyst inside of you to make a new decision. Right? And so there are 4 catalysts that I found that really help build up activation energy. The first of which is mentorship or coaching. If you are stuck, sometimes one of the most helpful things is to have someone else's energy pour into us. Whether that is through the practical of nervous system regulation, where literally just being around that person settles some of that fear and that anxiety, or whether that person's providing us frameworks like I'm doing right now, providing a framework that gives us a bit more confidence. Mentorship or coaching is a way in which we can receive energy from another person, and that can build up that activation energy inside of us to eventually make a different decision. The second catalyst for building activation energy is emotional thresholds. These can be big highs. They can be giant wins that motivate us to take the next step. But often they're actually rock bottom moments. And we hear that term all the time, rock bottom. I hit rock bottom. Why do so many people wait until rock bottom to change? It's energy. When the lower we go into rock bottom, there's a moment in which the emotion of that is so great, and emotion is energy in motion. So the emotion of that is so great that it causes us to cross that threshold. There's enough activation energy to make a new choice, to make a shift, a true declaration. And I remember for me, that rock bottom moment came in 2012. In 2012, I was going through the most difficult period of my life. I was in Los Angeles pursuing an acting career, and I had had many close calls, these various different parts of my journey that I felt I was right there, a huge part right there, and then pulled away from me at the last minute. And I had become so desperate that I had changed my name, I changed my hairstyle, I had signed a contract with this acting manager who at the time had promised me the world. And then when I tried to get out of that contract because nothing was happening, the manager was not doing anything, the manager made me literally print out my bank account statement and sign a check for every dollar I had in order to get out of that contract. So I was at a financial zero. And then on the way to work, I was working as a personal trainer at the time. I'm driving through my neighborhood and someone runs a stop sign, T-bones my car, and I need hip surgery. I have a concussion, but because I have no money, I have to go to work. So I'm limping into work as a personal trainer every day with a concussion, dealing with the music, literally absolutely miserable. And 1 week after that car accident, I walk out from the gym having the worst headache, limping, in pain, and I come out and my rental car had been hit and run on the side of the road. Literally the bumper is hanging off in complete disarray, undrivable. And in that moment, I break. That was my rock bottom. And it was those movies, those movies where you see where the main character, everyone's talking to them, it's wah, 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 and you can't really understand what's going on. I had that moment. And they say where the cracks are where the light gets in. And up until that point, I thought I had life figured out. I thought I knew what I was doing. But in that moment, I have no clue what's happening. I don't know what is going on. And in that moment, I humbled myself. I hit an emotional threshold and an activation energy of saying, I'm going to change something. And that led me into a plant medicine journey that would forever change my life. But that emotional threshold needed to be so intense because I was so convinced that I understood what was happening. So that's an example of an emotional threshold that can generate the energy necessary to actually change something. So that's number 1, mentorship or coaching. Number 2, emotional thresholds. Number 3, ceremony or ritual. So this is funny because I went into, from my rock bottom, I went into ceremony or ritual, which then led to more changes in my life. But it doesn't have to be a plant medicine ceremony. It can actually be a process like soul scavenger hunt. If you don't know, I have a free 90-minute activation journey to help you identify the direction of your soul's calling. And that is a process that people will go through that is ceremonial. It is ritualistic. It is very intentional. Action combined with intention creates ritual. And so you can create rituals or ceremonies that build that activation energy inside of you. Because when you symbolically close one chapter and open up another one, it builds this energy inside you. When you start to see through intentional action, you start to see the things that are ready to shift, that will build motivation inside of you. And so that third catalyst is ceremony or ritual, intentional action or process by which it will build that activation energy for you. And then fourth is community containers. This is the power of being surrounded by others in motion, right? The same, similar to coaching and mentorship, but a very different dynamic where you're not directly receiving from one individual who's focused on you from a mentorship energy. You are receiving it from a container. You are receiving it from a group, and just being in that field generates that energy inside of yourself. A great example of this is mob mentality. If you're familiar with mob mentality, that means that when people start a riot, when there's a mob that breaks out, there are people who do things inside the field, the container of that mob, that they would never do on their own. They would never do it if it was just 2 or 3 people. But once there's enough people, they get drawn in. That is the power, that is the magnetism of a field. So when you are in the field of people who are making positive changes in their life, when you are in a field of others in motion, it is something that feeds you and your activation energy and can charge you up to the point where you actually are ready to cross that threshold. This is why group coaching programs are so effective. This is why things like my Soul Momentum program is designed to give you a community space and see other people posting about their own journeys as they go through a week of transformation. These types of experiences are not just about the action themselves, they're also about the container and the field that you're in that is of benefit to you. And so For these four, the coaching and mentorship, the emotional thresholds, the ceremony or ritual, and the community containers, these are four catalysts that build activation energy. Inside of these are ways that you can be supportive to yourself by being honest, by being creative in how you express, by having safety. There are components that make these deeper, but I'm not going to go into all of them right now. But I want you to understand that if you show up fully and you show up creatively and you show up honestly to these four areas, these four catalysts, you will hit that threshold and that ignition moment, that moment where you actually make the decision. The decision's not the cause. The decision is the result. The declaration that I'm changing now happens because you've hit that energetic threshold inside of yourself that is now ready to be activated. The key here is you need to know the direction. You're saying yes to a new identity. You are saying yes to a new timeline for your life. But if you don't know what direction to go, that can be incredibly frustrating. That's almost as painful as feeling stuck because you can't get over the hump. Having all of the activation energy inside of you, but not even knowing what direction to move with it, not knowing what direction to point that energy can be massively overwhelming and painful as well. And so this is the importance of knowing the direction so that you can generate momentum. Momentum is when you move this activation energy in a particular direction. You have now started momentum. And once you have that, once you send the email, make the call, once you launch the program, once you hire the coach, whatever it is that is getting you into momentum, the next piece to that is consistency. Consistency, right? So you might have started a flame. It's like striking a match. That friction builds and builds and builds, and then finally the flame bursts forth. You've hit that threshold where there's actual fire. Well, guess what? Now you have to add kindling to it. Now you have to continue to fuel that, and you do that with consistency. Because if you don't add the consistency over time, if you don't continue to nurture that, eventually that force of fear and limiting belief and insecurity will be so great, it will slow you down. It will stop the expansion because the fears and doubts and limiting beliefs will still be in place because you haven't consistently taken the action to reprogram those beliefs. When you have new action consistently over time, you will have reframed your perspective on yourself. You will have actually integrated and embodied a new identity. And once you do that, that becomes your default state. You become an object in motion. You are someone who meditates every day. You are someone who journals. You are someone who does hard things. You've basically taken a decision and turned it into a pattern. And that is where everything changes. That is where you have this inertia, this momentum. You have crossed the threshold and you have become the person that others look to and say, wow, they can't be stopped. They are a snowball rolling downhill. They are just continuing to pick up steam. And you're not stuck because you're broken. You're not stuck because there's anything wrong with you. You're stuck because you haven't generated enough activation energy inside of yourself to hit that threshold of making a decision. And once you've made that decision and know the direction to point it, you haven't yet started building the momentum. But now you know how. Now you have an understanding of how to apply 4 catalysts to build that activation energy inside of yourself. You understand the importance of finding direction to point that activation energy and you understand the consistency required to build on that momentum. And so if you want to take steps towards this and you're not sure where to start, I encourage you to check out my Soul Scavenger Hunt. This will help you identify the direction of where to point this activation energy. And if you know the direction, then I encourage you to check out my Soul Momentum program. It's a 7-week activation that gives you, in less than an hour a day, something that will generate momentum in the direction that you want to go. And even if you're not into either of those offerings, I encourage you to apply these 4 catalysts intentionally into your life. I hope that I can continue to support you. If you've liked this video, if you resonated with this content, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment below and let me know what resonated most with you, or if there's any parts that are unclear that you'd like me to make more videos about. We're just getting started. I love making these videos and diving really deep into the frameworks, the methodologies, and most importantly, the actions that you and I can be taking so that we can create a life that we love. Thank you. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.